Hi, everybody, and a very warm welcome to the first episode of Beeps Media. This is episode one entitled White Sox Wasteland. I am your host, CEO, president, God Emperor, etc., Nick Schaefer, uh, otherwise known as Nicky Beeps in a past life. And actually, the name comes of removing any sort of mystery or suspense whatsoever. The name comes from a sort of side hustle career that spanned now 10 plus years, which is horrifying to think about going back to working for the Catbird Seat blog with a really excellent masthead, and then BP Southside. So BPSS became a sort of acronym for all of us over there. And then I served as minor league editor for Baseball Prospectus as a whole from I think 2018 to 2021 or something like that. But it's extremely pertinent to our first guest here. We're just here to just get some stuff off our mind, get our thoughts out there, catch up a little bit. I mean, it's really an excuse for me to talk to some buddies in the sports adjacent world. And this is Dr. 100 himself, Dr. Mark Primiano, who was, I believe, on both, at least BP Southside, and I believe Catbird Seat as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Very briefly, I got in like right at the tail end of it, right before the jump. So there were a couple articles where James would have shoot me stuff to email back to him when I was bored out in Kansas, and then he would write up and editorialize what I said. So a little bit of a couple appearances on Catbird's Seat, and then definitely more of BP Southside. Yeah.
Yeah, if you were in Kansas, does that mean you were still in vet school?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
we started the
and
Slack a couple months before I moved to Vegas.
man, and well, it's been so long. At least the White Sox have made the playoffs twice since that
Yeah.
time. They have not won a playoff series in that entire time period, and they only made one of them because it was the 2020 expanded playoff field. I think they were the seven seed or something like that. So that was not even. They
Yeah,
technically
I
have
got
two
to go
playoff
to my
appearances,
first
but
ever. Yeah, I got to go to my first ever White Sox playoff game uh, in 21, so that was neat. Only took
hmm,
33 years of life to be able to do that, but
marvelous. Yeah, yeah. No, I just turned. I think my voice may still be feeling the effects. I celebrated my 36th birthday over this past weekend, and it has been. I think that makes it 50% of my life since the White Sox have won a playoff series. It was because I was 2005 was the last time they won a playoff
yeah,
series. Some people may have heard of it.
that
um,
mythical year.
but obviously, yeah. Mark, just for full disclosure, I think so people know there's somebody else in the room with you. If you'd like to reveal our other special guest, who
Yeah,
I've been emailing him. He didn't wake up for the show.
no, he's out cold. He had a big morning of not doing anything. So yeah, right behind me is Dante, my 11-year-old orange and white cat, and then off to the right, asleep on top of the recliner by the window, is Virgil, my little 5-year-old orange cat, who is the bane of my existence, despite being adorable. I love him very much, but he is just terrible.
I mean, I could show my 5-year-old cat as well, but I think I would reveal far too much of the toddler zone if I did so in panning my camera. But we have our supervisors well in hand, so nobody needs to worry about that. Um, but bringing up 2005, bringing up that retrospective window, because obviously we're going to be. I don't want to hem myself in generally to White Sox conversations on this channel, and a lot of as we record on Monday, September 25th. There's a lot of Bears conversations that could match very neatly with some criticisms of the White Sox, and maybe someday I'll get there, not as mercifully, not as a Bears fan, but I did want to take a minute to sort of look back at the era, especially that you and I, when we were really spending a lot of time covering the team, to the point where we were writing recaps of almost every game. It was a very dedicated exercise to a team that did not reciprocate our efforts whatsoever. Um, and I wanted to move into the first segment that I want to title anything, which is called "Learning the Wrong Lessons from History." And to fit our title of White Sox Wasteland for today, Mark, I will start by reading you. What are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images, where the sun beats and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. Because we can now look back on the tenure of Rick Hahn as GM. He came in for the 2013 season and was dismissed abruptly in the middle of the 2023 season. And as we teased up front, they had one full winning season, two winning seasons, I suppose, between 2020 and 2021. One of those was only 60 games. They lost the hell out of their season during that time. Um, and as many White Sox fans are aware, and many other people in the national media are aware, we had like this 12-hour window where people were celebrating that the team was finally turning the page from Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams, before it was revealed that they were just promoting the next guy up, Chris Getz. Uh, and talk is talk, but when it comes to on the rare occasions where Jerry Reinsdorf actually puts his head above the parapet and deigns to speak to anybody, uh, I feel like he doesn't really. I don't think he's coy or trying to make things sound good. You know what I mean? Like if he was really trying to just say things that are sound bites that don't really mean what he says, then he wouldn't say the things he does, because the things he does are not reassuring at all and they're extremely insulting. I think they're deeply held beliefs of his. So he basically, one of the things he came out and said is that the most important thing is that we need to teach fundamentals in the minors and that people need to play like David Eckstein, because David Eckstein is like Eddie Stanky. Those are the two players he name checked and said they were going to beat us. So um, Mark, right before we recorded, and I mentioned we were going to be discussing David Eckstein, you expressed sympathy for Mr. Eckstein. Did you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I actually have his baseball reference page open because I figured you were going to go to that. I remember, I mean, we were all pretty much of the same ilk back then, in that Fire Joe Morgan was one of the most fun things to read. And it was like, yeah, screw those stodgy old douchebags who think they know everything. And David Eckstein, unfortunately, became this lightning rod of negative attention from the sabermetrics and analytical community, because you had guys like Joe Morgan and the older guard going, no, this is a guy, much like Jerry said, does it the right way, lunch pail kind of player, like his former teammate Darren Erstad, who we did eventually have as a White Sox, unfortunately. Uh, one of the only baseball players with my birthday is Darren Erstad. Uh,
Ah,
but
Joe Morgan's one of
get
mine.
David Epstein. So yeah, you at least got a Hall of Famer. I got Grindy McLunch Pail. Um, but now I'm being just as mean as ever. But no, you get David Eckstein, he was a good regular, like just plug-in guy, like not an all-star, nothing amazing, though he did have two all-star seasons with St. Louis. But it was just like a guy you could plug in and be like, all right, if you have a rest of a team like the '01 Angels or those mid-aughts Cardinals, you don't need A-Rod at shortstop. You don't even need Tim Anderson at shortstop. Well, good Tim Anderson, not current Tim Anderson. You just need a guy where it's like, yeah, this is a guy we can plug in for 150 games. He's going to provide solid defense, and he's just going to be there, and we don't have to worry, and he's not expensive. Yeah, it's good to have those, but like that should not be the goal of your farm system. The goal of your farm system should be producing better than that. Like, I mean, yeah, you're not going to hit a home run with every prospect, but if you're setting the bar at creating a regular starter, like dream a little bigger, baby. It's not that hard. But actually, yeah, I just felt a little bad, especially as we get older and you look back at how kind of mean spirited a lot of that internet era was. It's just like, this is a dude who never really did anything to call attention to himself. He wasn't going out
No.
there like Grant Balfour or anybody just being like, yeah, Joe Kelly, like no demonstrativeness, just this quiet little shortstop on really good teams, just like having a good time playing baseball. And it's like, yeah, fuck that guy. It's like, what the hell? He's just a dude.
Yeah, I mean, he had the. It was like sort of Forrest Gump thing where he was in on the 2002 Angels that won the World Series, and then on the 2000 was that six Cardinals that won the World Series. I
Yep.
don't know if he may have had another ring somewhere in there too. I don't know if he no he didn't hang out in St. Louis long enough to get
Yeah, just
a
those
third
two.
ring, but yeah, and he was like a fun player because he hit for average. He was tiny and he appeared to be he was 5'6" and he hit for a high average and he um, seemed to be trying his best. And he to take the lesson away from those teams though, to say the 2006 Cardinals or the 2002 Angels won because of David Eckstein is just like you can't say that with a straight face. Like there's no I mean he was maybe like you said if you have a David Eckstein having one of his good years and he's your seventh or eighth best position player, like you're in great shape because he's fine.
Yeah.
And you had prime Albert Pujols, you had prime Chris Carpenter, you had like Jim Edmonds, had these guys on those teams who were, um, really really good. And that Angels team was, I guess, that 2002 Angels team was kind of interesting in that like they didn't have sort of the Pujols type guy. They just had like a ton of above average players and um, some weirdly, effective pitch. It was kind of 2005 White Soxy where it was more
That was exactly
um,
what I was gonna say. Yeah.
an ensemble cast. It was more of an ensemble cast than any. You didn't have the transcendent superstars up top. You just had a lot of really good players, and we can talk about David Eckstein being the wrong lesson to draw. I suppose like if you want to be as charitable as possible and say that you want your Lenine Sosa's, the guys you're counting on to come up internally to fill out a contender to be more like David Eckstein. It's like, well, I would like them to be league average hitters who can field their position, yeah, as opposed to like disastrously bad players. It's like, sure, I
Oh
guess.
yeah.
Um, but if I'm aiming for that to be the ideal player, then your team's going to be awful. Your team's going to be
Yeah.
absolutely awful.
It's exactly like that. It's one thing where it's good to hope for being able to just crank out league average guys because that is a big part of the battle, and it's a part that the White Sox have been terrible at as long as you and I have been paying attention closely. And that, like, yeah, you'll get the occasional dude, but for the most part, when you're having to scrounge and go grab all these backups from elsewhere that wind up getting pushed into more prominent service, that is a failure of your farm system because it's not just that, like, oh, well, we're not producing homemade all stars. If you're not producing the rest of the roster, the regular bread that is here for your sandwich, like, yeah, you need to be able to make those. But Christ, if your goal is to be like, yeah, we want to be able to just make the most average lunch meat at our butcher shop, it's like, why even have the shop? You're dreaming of this
Yeah.
incredibly low bar, and it's depressing, especially when you're bringing in people from uh, honestly the one of the only teams you can say has been run worse in all of Major League Baseball, if not all of the Big Four in North America, in Kansas City, in that there are so few franchises. Because, like, the White Sox, it's like, yeah, at least most of our childhood, they were above 500. You were at
Hmm.
least in the playoff hunt. You didn't make it. Every 4 years or so, you made the playoffs. And it's like, okay, like, it's good enough. It's not great, but it's palatable. Whereas Kansas City, I'm just going to go from 1990 because that seems like a nice round number. They never finished above 500. They've got like what, like 5 seasons above 500, and three of those were back to back to back, and then right back to the abyss. Like, yeah, you
Yeah.
went to two
Yeah.
World Series in a row and you won one of them, which kicks ass. It's great. And realistically, though, like the one year they wouldn't even have done anything if not for the wild card play-in game. Because I distinctly remember watching
Yep.
that ball get right past the third baseman in Oakland, and you're like, all right, well, I mean, that is baseball. But yeah, you go right back into the abyss after decades of atrocious failure. And I'm jumping ahead of myself here with talking about
No.
Gene Watson, but of the four big moves they've done for rebuilding the GM office, like Chris Getz, he's got that Kansas City stink on him, but he also has a lot of White
Hmm.
Sox stink on him in that it's very strange to me that you get rid of the two people ahead of him, the two people who were in charge of training him, the two people he learns under, and you go, all right, they're complete failures. This was
Hmm.
catastrophic. You are the right man for the job. No, you go outside the org and you hire somebody else. You get an outside idea in, and then to be bringing in a guy whose entire thing it's like, oh, it's this Gene Watson, this super well respected scout, and you're like, all right, well, where was he a scout at? And it's like, oh, well, he was the senior director of pro scouting, assistant GM for Kansas City from '06 to 2020, and it's like that is disgusting. You are looking at a guy who was the assistant GM, head of pro scouting on a team that in 3 of those years lost 100 or more games.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. It's
I know there's 30 teams and there's only so many spots, but Christ, what are you doing?
no, it's really bleak. Like where it's one thing to say, well, we had a plan and we didn't execute it well, but the plan could have worked. But they're already starting with a plan where, look, is it there's a lot of people who are involved with these different decisions, and there's people who compile the information and they interpret it and they fit it into a broader strategy, and then there's luck involved. There's all kinds of moving parts, so it's not to say that like Gene Watson is definitely an idiot or something like that, but you don't there's no reason to think you're doing anything other than when you say we want to be like David Eckstein, we're focusing entirely on fundamentals. And what's really weird is that, like, to say, oh well, Reinsdorf defended promoting Chris Getz to the lead job by saying, well, he's the guy who was teaching it the right way. Finally, in 40 something years, I have a minor league director who was teaching the game the way I wanted to be taught with knowing what to do. And it's like, there's no evidence that that's true. There's no evidence. There's,
Nope.
one of the biggest things that people have focused on, which to me feels like a distraction, feels like a really secondary or tertiary issue, is that, Oscar Colas doesn't know what base to throw to all the time, or they miss the cutoff man or something like that. And like, yeah, that's annoying. It feels like something you can control. It definitely hurts you if you make mistakes like that. But at the same time, like, that's not why you're going to lose 100 games this year. It's not why you're going to lose 100 games. You're going to lose 100 games because nobody can hit on this team. Not a single person can hit on this team other than Luis Robert. Um, and that's been the problem for pretty much the entirety of Rick Hahn's tenure. And I call it that because, I understand that he and Kenny Williams were working in tandem on different things at different times. And so we're really talking about 20, almost 25 years, and the first 8 or 9 of those were quite successful. So it's hard to it's a bit of a moving target. But when we say we're learning the wrong, to stick to my theme about learning the wrong lessons from history, you can say we're going to start onboarding all these people from Kansas City because we really liked how they did things for 2015. It's like, well, we just got rid of the guys who were only hanging on because of what they did in 2005. So we're still a decade behind trying to pull off this. I mean, if you want to say we want to primarily build around defense, I mean, because it's cheap, I guess that's at least a plan. But I feel like it's hard to sustain year to year. Um, and part of what I'm influenced by the fact that we're about the same age. We grew up in the '90s watching those teams that could really hit and couldn't pitch at all, which is a certain kind of frustration. But I think it's more entertaining because like you run your bad pitcher out there and you fall behind 3-0 in the first inning. But if you have Frank Thomas and Albert Bell, you're like, well, that's not insurmountable. We can get those runs back. Whereas with these Rick Hahn teams who just cannot hit, they can't hit. You're like, well, maybe Luis Robert hits a solo home run, or if we give up a run, we lose, and it
Yeah,
feels
I mean
awful. Or if
the
you do, if
the
you do
past
get up, you're
two
just trying to
years,
cling to a one-run lead, and
yeah, the past 2 years have been exactly as you described, a horrible monotony of, all right, you're down two. It's like there's no comeback here. It's over already.
no.
Whereas, yeah, like when you had Frank, you had Ray Durham, you had Maglio, Carlos Lee was just like, all right, you at least had guys where it's like, all right, we're down 3 or 4, whatever, we might lose, but like, there's a chance, there's a strong enough chance that we're an inning away from just like, yeah, you made a couple bad pitches and we're right back at it. Whereas now it's just the margin of error is so non-existent that the second they're down, and especially this year where it was just the worst vibes season of all time, at least in our
Yeah.
lives. I mean, realistically, like the worst vibe seasons would probably be, when the Black Sox were found out, not so much in 19, but like the next year, and it's like, oh no. But yeah, you get stuff like this where it's this hurt more than 2016, where it was like, all right, things are falling apart. We've reached the catastrophe. This was more like this was supposed to still be the window, and it would be one thing to have had like a 500 season and just miss, but this where it's you're looking at maybe a 100 loss season,
And they
it's
were dead in April. They came out of the gate and
oh
they
yeah,
were
it was
awful like right
oh
away.
yeah, it's
They were dead right
only
away.
game the only game I went to this year was the 10th loss in a row. The one against
Hmm.
Tampa where Lance Lynn was throwing a no-hitter. We're up I think 3-0 and going into the 7th, and they wound up losing by 10. And it was just like I remember looking at the group I was with, just going, "I'm out. Sorry, guys." I'm like, well, I just left. It's like I don't want. I didn't want to stick around for this.
Yeah.
I was
No,
like,
I
the
mean,
weather was great. It was a beautiful day, but it's the stadium experience has gotten so bad. Um, it's just it feels like open antagonism of the fan base, and it's really hard to just be like, yeah, I'm gonna sit here for this. Like I know you
yeah,
at least living out of state, you don't have to go through it, but when COVID hit and they were finally able to reopen in 2021, something cracked in the way the stadium worked, in that the food got a lot worse. They can't get you in on time. Like the gates are supposed to open at a certain time and they open like 15, 20 minutes late routinely. Uh, you're stared at as a person holds up a piece of wood roughly the size of a clamshell VHS case, telling you can't bring in a bag bigger than that. And one of the things I was so excited about when I moved back to Chicago from Vegas was like, all right, well, I live in the city. I can just hop on a train after work and go to a Sox game. And in 2019, I would go with my backpack from work and I'd get there and they're like, oh, what's in there? I'd open it up and they'd see my scrubs and they're like, yeah, just go in. It's no problem. And now it's just, you get stared at and someone's still got a gun in the stadium. And it's like, what the hell's going on here? All the security theater and some two people still get shot in the middle of the stadium. It's what are
yeah.
we doing?
Yeah, no, I haven't. I live in New York City, so I haven't been to a game at I think nearly called US Cellular since 2018, 2019, something like that. I usually, at
Would
least
it have
up
been that
until
one?
this year, I would. Was up?
Would it have been the BP meetup back in 18?
Yeah, I think it was when Trevor Bauer got knocked out of the game with a broken leg, which was the vibes were good.
Awesome.
Um,
Yeah, that's great.
but we No, I mean they come through New York once or twice a year, depending on if they're also playing the Mets. They always play a series against the Yankees, and I usually, it's sort of a family. That was what I grew up going to. Is that if the White Sox were in town, we would go. My dad would take us to go see them, and Frank Furkey invited me to go see him this year, and I like just speaking honestly, I told him I was like, I'd rather go with you to see a different team. Like let's go a different game. I don't want to be forced to watch a White Sox game that I can't just turn off. Um, I don't want to. Like I said, I've got a 1.5 year old. I'm not really trying to ask my wife, to like watch him by herself or hire a babysitter or something because I'm gonna go watch this team. Like it's not gonna make me happy. Like there are players on the team I still like. There were more players on the team I liked then. Before the trade deadline when they came through town, but um, it's really shocking because like when you zoom out, you can talk to I and I plan on doing, we've already been going for 25 minutes. I don't want to be going through every single Rick Hahn trade, free agent signing or free agent lack of signing. That was just like obviously stupid the instant it happened, and for all of his aggressive and preening sound bites about how, oh, everyone wants to judge these moves right away. It's like, well, they tend to be right and you tend to be wrong. So, we've got now that it's over, it's been 10 years, you can say, let's wait and see, let it all play out. And it's like, well, we did, and we were right. You didn't know what you were doing.
And
Um,
what
but
was his line
it's
about like wait till the parade? Like we'll
Oh
judge it
yeah,
after
ask
the
me after the
parade.
parade.
And
Yeah,
uh
yeah,
because that was my last jab at him was Kenny got a lot of undue criticism uh, for very obvious, unfortunate reasons. Like there were legitimate gripes you could
yes,
have with the way Kenny Williams ran a baseball team, but it was always clear, even when we were in junior high, that parts of the negative picture of Kenny are because he is an African American man. And
yep.
that is incredibly unfortunate, but it is a fact that does not get rid of all criticisms because there are very fair criticisms, but it put an unfortunate extra amount on him. And I thought he handled it decently in that there was never like a talking down to. There's a great Carl Scanberg when he used to do his White Sox cartoons, and there's the one at Sox Fest of the question and anger session, and someone goes, "Don't you mean question and answer?" And he goes, "No, reform it in a different sentence." And he gets really angry at him, and it was like, yeah, because like if Kenny didn't like a question or something, it was just like his response was very honest, very like angry at you, just like, no, that's a stupid thing to say. Why would you say that? Whereas Rick, it was just like, I'm smarter than you, and it's like, no, you're not.
Mhm.
You're clearly not.
No,
Like there are
no, and
things
I'm
you did
sure
well,
like
but man, you could not run a baseball team.
no, I mean I think because any GM who has done as badly as him is almost never given the length of time to screw up as much as he did. So he winds up being like it's like he didn't have the lowest batting average of a GM of all time, but he was able to accumulate the most negative wins above replacement because he had like the rope to do it. Most GMs don't get a decade when you never win. Um, and he's still left us with like it's amazing. He's gone, but obviously this is still the roster he put together, and this was supposed to be the we're supposed to be on the other side of his grand rebuilding project. It was like, here's the trade I'm offering you. We will lose 100 games for like 4 years, and then we'll be good for a long time on the other side. And then they just weren't. They're just terrible. Like he said, sustainable pipeline of talent. He was like, we're going to develop all this stuff. We're going to change the way we do things. They traded some all stars for some other guys, and then nothing else happened. They're still just the same, uneven. But I mean, now it looks really bad because they traded away the competent, whatever major leaguers weren't tied down. Um, but it's really astonishing how, how poorly it went and how condescending he was. You're absolutely right, and I think it's always worth remembering that like filtering the Kenny Williams criticism for. I mean, I don't know if people remember, especially in like 2006, 2000 to 2008, when he had the ring and everyone was really, really aggressive about saying it was a fluke. Um, People were really interested in saying like, oh, he's just this like, cowboy, this guy who doesn't know what he's doing. He got lucky, like whatever. And a lot of it is just because they didn't like that he was a black executive who wasn't, like you said, scared to call out a stupid question if he thought it was stupid. Whereas Rick
Well, yeah, you
Hahn
get
talked
the
so much trash for so long and with nothing to back it up.
you get the a couple appearances in Moneyball where
Hmm.
Michael Lewis makes it seem like Kenny is just this dipshit idiot where any time that he interacts with Billy Bean just like fleeces the hell out of him. And it's like you look back and it really wasn't like that so much. Like, oh no, they traded Miguel Olivo and Billy Koch and yeah, they especially like you get the line in the draft where the Sox draft Royce Ring and they're like, oh man, look at all these guys we can get. And you look back at that '02 Moneyball draft, and other than Swisher and I think Joe Blanton might have been part of it, it's just bleak. I mean, you get Mark Teahan, you get all these guys where it's
Yeah.
like, all right, like
No, and
future
and
White Sox
like
Mike
I
Mark
think it
Teahan, but
was
yeah, you get all this, yeah.
I think it was like oh yeah, the Miguel Olivo tree because I think it was the White Sox traded Chad Bradford for Miguel Olivo,
Hmm.
and it's like, oh man, like what a ripoff. Chad Bradford's so effective, and it's like, yeah, Bradford was like a good reliever, and it's not like the White Sox didn't know that. He was a good reliever for them. If you were saying like, I'm pretty sure Chad Bradford was on the White Sox major league team for like a little while before
He
that.
was.
So if the prem, yeah, he was good for them for. I mean, it was briefly, but they gave him some run, and he was effective for them. So if the premise of your thing is like, well, the A's identified that his weird delivery was making people underrate him. It's like, well, clearly the team that promoted him to the majors and used him, it was not a barrier to them using him. That wasn't some inefficiency they hadn't identified. They just thought Miguel Olivo was a starting catcher, and that was more valuable than like a right-handed like relief specialist. And you can do the add up the WAR, and you can look at their careers afterwards. And Bradford was like had a great career, and maybe he was better than the White Sox thought, and Miguel Olivo was worse than the White Sox thought. But like of all the trades to kill somebody for, that's like, I mean, Miguel Olivo hung around as a catcher, and I guess the irony is there was the way we value catcher defense has changed so much since that time, with like the old timey scouts being vindicated by the new metrics of framing and all that stuff. But um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
Olivo played until he was
it's
30.
it's
The White Sox flipped him as part of the Freddie Garcia deal, so it's one of those where it's like, all right, yeah, you can't judge things just off of the instant they happen. It's not the NFL, it's not the NBA where it's like your results are guaranteed pretty much out the gate. Like this is what you got. Like yeah, Olivo wound up playing another oh 11, 12, 13 years after that, and
yeah.
Bradford was out of baseball not terribly long after. And then you also,
Uh,
yeah, Bradford was 9.
hmm,
He and yeah, he was a good relief
he was good.
pitcher, but it's one of those where it's you get stuff where it's like, all right, well, Olivo they flipped into Freddie Garcia, a good starting pitcher, who then they flipped into Gavin Floyd, right?
Yeah,
No, Floyd was from
yeah.
Matomi. Yeah, Floyd was from Rowan, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
Gio
no,
Gonzalez. Yeah, but like
it's
you get all the yeah.
it's crazy because like of all the I mean, trading a reliever to even if you say, okay, we think Miguel Olivo's a bad starting catcher, but he's still a starting catcher, like that's a totally valid choice to make. You know, because you think, hey, we can find relievers. Catchers are hard to find. A regular versus a reliever. All those questions. So like, yeah, it's not the same thing. If you say you're trading the type of player you want as opposed to just, we traded Chris Bassett for Jeff Samardzija. Chris Bassett is a better pitcher than Jeff
No,
Samardzija. I don't even need to think about anything else. Um, no, it's really frustrating that, I guess if you want to take, if I bring this back full circle, and I suppose we've kind of merged into the some of the Rick Hahn retrospective, which happy to have you back on again soon to discuss further. I guess it's not going anywhere. We still have, if we take a minute to even acknowledge the present state of the team as September 2023, and then saying like looking forward. Um, and so this is where I'll ask you for your hot takes, like I warned you about beforehand. We still
oh yeah,
have these Rickon duds kicking around the roster. We have Andrew Benintendi for another 4 years after this, and it sure looks like he can't play anymore. I mean, not really. And he got rid of Jake Berger right before he left, and it's like, maybe Jake Ader turns into like a great pitcher, but you could see. I think it's just sort of like if you zoom out, you can pick apart any of these little pieces, but if you zoom out, you step back from the impressionist painting of garbage that this is, and you can see the big picture trends of just like doing dumb guy things. Like this Jake Berger, it's like you're terrible at developing hitters. You're terrible at generating bats, period. Finding them free agency and trades, anything. You cannot find hitters at all, especially guys who can stand anywhere on the field, but let alone anyone who can hit at all. And you trade him for a pitching prospect, and pitching's like the thing that you've kind of still able to cobble together or identify on the cheap. So it's just already like it's like, hey, forget everything about these specific players. It's like, why are we trading bats for arms right now? Why are we still doing that? Why is that happening? And so we got Hans parting gifts on those fronts as well as Chris Getz tries to recreate the post 2015 Royals for some reason. Um, And
I
yeah,
mean, Burger could have been our Billy
I know
Butler.
I'm leaving. Who Dayton Moore did not acquire, I don't think. Wasn't Billy Butler a an Allard Baird guy? I think
I
he
mean,
and
I think
Alex
Moore
Gordon were
was
both
wasn't
Allard
he
Baird guys.
wasn't he Bear's right hand man at the time, or was he
Oh
already
God, who
with
knows? Probably.
Atlanta? Yeah,
Yeah. So
I,
no, it's I'm troubled, and this is gonna fit with one with my negative hot take, but I wanted to give you a chance. I think we should start with the negatives and end on the positive.
I mean, I think my
If you
negative
don't
actually
mind
might be
sharing, what's
might
your
be the same as yours.
moving forward? Okay, what's your
Yeah,
negative hot take?
my negative hot take is the White Sox finish last in the AL Central next year.
Oh, okay. As a
I
prediction,
think there's a yeah, I think there's a very realistic chance that Kansas City jumps them. They're both horribly constructed rosters, and unless the White Sox actually do stuff in free agency, you're looking at all right. So we've got Luis Robert, they've got Bobby Witt, both juniors, both all star, going to be the face of their franchise for until they get traded away. Um, and then surrounded by not much else. Like Andrew Vaughn is a quietly competent hitter, but that's not exactly what you want out of your first baseman. You want a little more. I like Andrew Vaughn a lot,
no.
but I would not be shocked if the White Sox finish last in the division next year, which is incredibly
I
embarrassing
wouldn't.
because it's a terrible
Yeah.
division.
No, and that really fits well with like if they do, that's part of. And look, Jerry, I said I'd take him at face value. Some of these things he's lying about, but like when he promoted Chris Getz to the role of lead decision maker, he said, "Well, part of why I did this is because I could bring in anybody, even Branch Rickey, and they would take a full year to evaluate the organization. Whereas, Chris already knows everybody, so he can do it faster. And I don't want our fans to have to suffer through a long period of time. And like, granted, that was the one thing I thought I was at least kind of happy to hear in the sense that like the Bears are in the process of doing this right now, where they're like, "Oh, you need to be patient with us. Give us time. Give us time. Give us time." And it's like, no, no, no. We already gave you the time. Already gave you the time. You already did the tank teardown. You shot that bullet. You shot the bullet of we're going to be bad for a while so that we can redo things and set things up good. We've already waited. It's already been like you said. Like I said, it's been 18 years since they won a playoff series. Um, it's just not reasonable. That's not a reasonable position to take. That's what fans should be asked to sit through. I understand that if you want to just like always have a winner, you could go root for whoever's winning at the time. And honestly, I don't even fault people who do that. Like the Braves organization, like I have my thoughts, but like that lineup's super fun. And if you just want to go watch the Braves like mash the crap out of the baseball, like it's entertainment. It's fun. Go do it. Like go root for the Braves if you want.
Yeah.
I wish I could shake myself of this White Sox illness. So this is part of my coping mechanism is just being vindicated they're that they're dumb as all hell. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't think that's true, and I kind of want to. I've been meaning to. Something I'm planning on doing, teaser for future projects, is to be confirm my suspicion and alarm bells that were screaming in my head when Reinsdorf said it would take a year for someone else to come in and like get up to speed and get this fixed up. Um, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think it'll take more than a
I
year
do
to
think
like
it might be
overhaul the
true for Branch
systems.
Rickey. It might be true for
Yeah, I
Branch
mean, he'd
Rickey
probably want
because
to
I
like
mean, you got to spend at least half that year finding a necromancer or a reanimator of some sort.
Yeah, and then he's gonna want to like check. He's gonna need to learn what happened in like the 50 years since he died, and like he's probably gonna want to see his like great grandkids, or there's a lot of stuff he's gonna have to do. Like if he invested in Coca-Cola or whatever in 1948, like he's got to go collect those returns. Um, no, but I think that
He's gonna
while I
be real
agree that
excited to
it
see
would
Harrison
take.
Ford playing.
Yeah, yeah. Um, But like, I think it'll take time to overhaul the systems and get everything all caught up to where they need to be or where they should have been all along. I don't think it would take a year to have someone come in and identify who sucks and who's good and who's fixable and who's not. And we see how fast did Dombrowski turn the Phillies around. It doesn't take It doesn't take somebody to have it with intimate knowledge of the Birmingham Barons to like sign Bryce Harper. It just doesn't. Like you don't need to know that. We know they don't have a right fielder for next year. You like I know that anybody looking at this knows that. You can look at the minor league system. There's nothing. Like unless you think Colas can turn it around, like whatever. There's nobody. So like why do I need a full calendar year to figure out we need to go get a right fielder? Like this is not like if you think about this for more than 30 seconds, it doesn't make any sense. It was a BS justification. Um, there's a chance that anyway, yeah. So no, I think there's a wide range of what could happen. I think it's a safe bet to bet on the White Sox being bad, especially as they keep robbing Kansas City of their apparently dumbest individuals. If Pedro Grifol is anybody to go on, so we're actively pulling the stupid guys away from Kansas City and putting him on our own ship. I like that take. It's a good negative take. We'll see what happens in the offseason. There's stuff that both respective teams could do to make me disagree with that take, but I think it's a very plausible take. Cole Ragans, I don't even know. Cole Ragans looks really good for Kansas City, so we shall see.
Yep.
My negative take, because we'll stick with negativity, and it does dovetail with this pretty well. Everyone knows my Eloy isn't actually a good take, and I've been saying it for so long that now it's just kind of, I think it's just people just kind of agree. He's not good, or not as good as he needs to be for the way they planned around him existing on the roster. But so the my new negative hot take is Brian Bannister was not a good hire. Brian Bannister is very popular in certain sectors of the internet. I call it a hot take because like if I'm wrong, um, that's on me and that's fine. Part of this is also does not technically have to do with his job and that he wasn't allowed to be with the team because he was a staunch anti-vaxxer. And I think this team, for all that they bleat and whine about people not being team players in the clubhouse and blah 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 blah, if your like chief science officer of pitching is going to be an anti-vaxxer, I think already off out of the gate um, you're setting yourself up for some very obvious questions that I think are very difficult to answer. Um, so there's that. The other thing too is learning the long lessons from history. We are not going to catch up to everyone else by going slower than them. I think Brian Bannister is behind is was may once have been ahead of the curve and now no longer is. I've talked to some people who were excited about the hire who said, "Well, he's ahead of where the White Sox were," and it's like, well, whatever. So am I. Like they didn't hire me, and it would be a bad idea for them to hire me. So like that doesn't make it a good hire. It's just another like friend of Chris Getz is from the Royals. Now, granted, like they are so understaffed that hiring like anybody at all, just extra bodies around to like do work and learn things and contribute information to the pool is probably going to make things better. But I don't think it is good enough, and I think it's sounding off red flags to me. I don't think the post rebuild pivot into just acquiring more kind of like weird jerks is like a good part of the Rick Hahn era that we've sort of seen, and honestly like has more direct ties to Chris Getz at this point between Vizquel and Helms and things like that, and the Royals specifically. The interest in Dayton Moore, who I'm sure people seem to think he's like, I'm sure he thinks he's a really nice guy, and he's doing this weird like, I don't know if it's religious or whatever, but his like Luke Heimlich rehabilitation tour. Don't Google Luke Heimlich on your work computer. But
Honestly, any
like,
computer.
yeah, it's just well, I mean, like you should be aware of what they were trying to do in Kansas City. So I think that like we've gotten the White Sox have remained dumb, have fallen further behind the rest of the league, and it seemed to be pivoting to just like bringing in kind of scummy, weird people, and that doesn't seem to be the solution to me. So that's my hot take. I'm open to Barfield being cool. I'm even open to like Gene Watson, whatever, being fine. I like that they're adding people. I'd like them to not be from the Royals. I would like them to not have public like bad stuff that we know about them. That's my negative take.
Barfield, I'm
Do you have
actually
a positive hot take?
decently excited. But I want to just piggyback on the
Yeah, no, I
Barfield
think
one
it's
real
cool.
quick before I get to the positive. And that, like, I actually
Sure.
think pretty highly of him. One, his dad is from Joliet, and so as someone else whose dad is from Joliet, like, instant bond. There's only one person from Joliet I will not defend, and that is Andy Dick. Anyone else from Joliet, they have a loyal soldier in me. There's a couple pro wrestlers that are billed as
Uh-huh.
from Joliet, and they're supposed to be bad guys. And when I go to the event and they're announced as from Joliet, I just start screaming, and I'm like, I know he's a bad guy, but come on, he's from home. Like he can't be all that bad. But Barfield, that's one where getting a guy who it's like, all right, you were the farm director for Arizona, and it's like that is a perpetually good farm system. So at least that it's like, all right, we at least have a guy from a team that does something well, and we stole a dude who does it well. So that at least made me a little happy. Where it was like, of the three, he was the one I'm the most excited about in that it
Mhm.
shows the most promise that maybe it's all the other people in the organization that are why they're good, but it's at least like, all right, we stole a guy from an organization that recognizes how to produce young talent and do it consistently, and now he's with us. It's like, all right, that's at least decent. But my positive one would be, um, especially after his last start, Dylan Cease rebounds back to form and becomes a Cy Young candidate,
Mm.
top three finisher again next year, albeit on a very, very bad White Sox team. So it'll be kind of like with the year Greinke won it and when King Felix was winning it, and you have just like, yeah, it's this guy who wins it with like 14 wins on like a 72 win team. But I fully believe Cease bounces back. I was just
Yeah.
trying to find like the
I
only
think that's a
positive I could
really
think of. Yeah.
no. I think that's a really good one. I think there's some signs of life of that already down the stretch here, to the extent that anybody's still even checking the box score, which don't blame me if you don't. I barely do these days. Um, and I think one of the low key, what was really kind of grimly funny was that towards the end, when Rick Hahn started identifying that they couldn't find enough offense, that they started trying to like sacrifice defense to give the offense a jolt, and they succeeded in hurting the defense, but the offense didn't get any better. So I think like low key and defensive metrics are all over the place. The defense this year has been awful again, like absolutely atrocious again, which learning the lessons from wrong lessons from 2005. The defense in 2005 was really really good. Uh, Kansas City, part of why they won in 2015 was their defense was really really good. It is not the only way to win. That's kind of what's cool about the sport is you can build a team in a lot of different ways, and whatever the result is, such that you score runs better than you prevent giving them up. That is one way to do it, and it's so funny that Han was like bringing these high leverage relievers with all of his money. His like free agent money was spent on relievers to try to like cling to these tiny leads, but while also kicking the defense into the ocean. Is like it's very very funny. The defense has been awful this year. You could very cheaply turn this defense around and make it a lot better for 2024, which would help Dylan Cease quite a bit. I think if he stays healthy, he's still uh, very talented and could still be very good. I think that is a reasonable bet, especially as a buy low, as a hot take. I will co-sign. Uh, I actually, I guess that kind of dovetails. It's funny. I'm looking at my show notes, and this is I that I prepped for doing this. Everybody already knew my old positive hot take, which is that Yohan Moncada is actually good. I still subscribe to that. I still think he shows that like he didn't just like forget how to play baseball. Um, when he's healthy, he's still good. Obviously, it's very hard to know when he'll be healthy, if he will be at all. But going for my hot take, and this goes back, this sort of dovetails with yours. It dovetails with the presser, and it cuts against your negative hot take, which is that you could turn this team around pretty quickly. My hot take is that you could turn this team around very quickly. There's like almost no money committed beyond this year. Um, Luis Robert is still good. I think Moncada is still good if he's healthy. I think you did throw. I mean, I don't know that I agree with how it was done. You did throw a lot of money or throw a lot of assets at high level minor league arms so that you could have guys coming in next year. Um, I think you could just sign a bunch of like mid to cheap free agents and get this team to be like competitive again very quickly if you wanted to. Um, whether that's sustainable or like a great model or not prone to risk, like, yeah, obviously you backed yourself into a corner. But if you're saying we want to be good in 2024 such that we can compete in this awful division, I think it's doable. These positions are not hard to upgrade on. These positions aren't hard to upgrade on at all. You got major league worst production at multiple places. Um, at least I think probably at like three or four positions. Like, don't. Don't run with like a really bad plan A and no plan B at like half of your roster. Just don't do that again. And you will immediately be give yourself a shot. You know, like have things go right. Have like pick up Tim Anderson's option. Maybe he'll be healthy next year. You know, sign some cheap free agents so you don't have Sebi Zavala getting the bulk of your catching PAs. Like this isn't that hard. It really isn't. To be decent, it is not hard to be decent. So that's my hot take: is that if you want to, and you're not an idiot, this team could be decent in 2024. Um,
No, that's all it takes is
but that's
plugging
a
in
lot of
like
ifs.
3 spots, like you said. But exactly, we've got a 30+ year history of knowing that's not how this team works, and that's the hard part of it. Is
Hmm.
yeah, like if you go out and get an actual catcher, or if the new catcher we traded for, not Corey Lee, but Kuros actually makes the jump, like cool. But like yeah, get a second baseman, get a right fielder, two positions that you've abandoned forever. And it's just like
Hmm.
these aren't hard spots to fill, especially right field. God damn it, that's an easy spot to fill,
It
and we
really
just
is.
never do.
It
Like
really is.
it's not like it's not like ah damn, we can't get a an all-star shortstop or an ace pitcher. It's like yeah, those are hard spots to fill, but it's like we just had an all-star shortstop. We have an all-star center fielder. It's like we're nailing the hard spots, but the easy shit we somehow can't touch.
Yeah, that was a real defining trait of the Han era in particular, was like you'd be rolling out there with Chris Sale and Jose Quintana and Jose Abreu, and you'd be like, well, do we have a DH or a right fielder? And be like, oh, no, absolutely not. Are we trying to do anything to get one? No, no,
Whereas
absolutely
now we have like the
not.
glut of DH, first base, and left field, and it's like great. None of them are very good. Uh,
Hmm.
someday,
No.
someday.
Yeah. Oh,
I
also
hope.
just stop playing people when they're injured. When they have a minor injury, put them on the IL, let them heal before you put them back out there. I just saved you like 20 losses right there. Done. You're welcome.
Yeah.
And I say that, well, you're a medical professional. Can you confirm that thought?
Yeah. I mean, we did have the
Being injured is bad?
fun where back when we were all way more online than we are and watched more baseball than we did because we were younger and had more time. And there'd be like a big injury, and everybody in the Slack would be like, "Mark, what happened to him?" And I just like privately type it to us, and I'm like, "Yep, this is what happened to Kyle Schwarber because you played him in the outfield when you shouldn't." And it's like next day, it's like, "This is the injury." It's like, "Yeah, this is."
Yeah.
We do the same stuff in the backyard. My neighbors put a TV out and we'll watch football, and everyone like turns. They're like, "So what just happened to his knee?" I was like, "This is what just happened to his knee." Like, yeah.
But you have not changed your Twitter handle to like injury professor and sold subscriptions to your watching TV diagnoses, weirdly enough. Funny how that
No,
happens.
I also
Um,
I have better hair than that guy, so
oh, that you're acting like I was referring to someone specific. I don't know where you got that inclination. I was just speaking hypothetically of something you did not do. Um,
mm,
but dude, I'm so thrilled that you were. It's nice to see your face again, hear your voice again. One day we'll have a fun White Sox team to talk about, but in the meantime, you make talking about a miserable White Sox team fun anyway. And thanks for being the first guest on the inaugural show. I mean, I assume more people follow you than follow me anyway, but where can people find you, especially in this era of uh, social media volatility?
yeah. So I am on both Twitter and on Blue Sky with the same handle, and that handle is um, Doctor 100. That's Doctor, and then the number one, and then 100 spelled out because I don't know why I did it that way. I had to make it as difficult as possible to explain verbally. But yeah,
Yeah,
thanks
so I
to
guess it would be
a
DR, the numeral one, and then the word 100.
Doctor full word, the numeral
Oh, got
one,
it.
and then
Okay.
100. Yeah, I literally made
Got to
this as
specify.
complicated as possible. Yeah, like just really should have streamlined that, but never did. But yeah, both Twitter and Blue Sky for that. If you live in Chicago, I'm on WGN every so often, holding animals up and talking on the news. If
Yeah.
you randomly catch my repeat episode of Jeopardy, that airs like once a year,
Yeah, you
so
did
it's
not have a
very
mustache
fun
for
to.
that.
No, no, they were actually really confused when I got there because the picture I submitted when on my last application I had hair to like probably like the back of my neck and I had a mustache. And so when I got there, the casting coordinator was just looking around and she comes up, she goes, I didn't recognize you. I'm like, sorry. So I had like normal, regular hair again, no mustache. Looked like a straight-laced member of society once more.
Mm, never again. Um, well, thank
Never
you so
again.
much for joining us. I will
Thanks so much for having
I'll
me,
let you
man.
know when we run this silly thing. And I'm gonna hit stop recording right now. Um, and I think you need to just hang out while yours uploads because